Thank you for joining me. I'm Gord Long. A reminder before we begin, do not trade from any of these slides. They're commentary for educational and discussion purposes only. Always consult a professional financial advisor before making any investment decisions. We've been talking about investment in the defense sector even prior to our 2020 thesis paper entitled Global Conflict. Though we often touch on it in our weekly newsletters, it merited at this time a long wave on the subject due to recent major groundbreaking shifts that are in the process of altering the alignment of the global defense sector. As such, I'd like to discuss the subjects outlined here. As usual, the goal of the monthly LONGWave video is to abstract what is happening in the global macro and geopolitical realm into what it might mean to your investment portfolio allocations. We don't give investment advice at Matasi.com, but we hope to tell you where to fish. Catching the fish, we leave to you. I want to start with changing strategic geopolitics as viewed from the U.S. perspective, and more specifically from that of the new Trump administration. The sweeping areas being addressed by the new administration are truly unprecedented and to many quite confusing and even alarming. What we need is to see things from President Trump's perspective. Whether you agree with him or not, what is important in this video is to recognize what he sees as priorities to be regarding the defense of the United States of America. Though the defense sector has performed quite well, as we suspected it would since our 2020 thesis paper, indications are it may now only be beginning to launch itself as a key investment theme similar to how gold has become institutional central bank buying. In the defense sector, it will also be about increased levels of institutional buying. Specifically, they increase buying from governments who have the motive to urgently make up substantial ground on their national defense requirements. There is little doubt that the U.S. defense spending dominates. However, the new buying increases are going to come from new areas. Before we get into that, let's talk about how the U.S. is actually the driver of this potential new buying due to forcing the realignments of U.S., European, and Western defense priorities. The new Trump administration clearly sees a halting of the Ukraine war as a priority. That is because Trump sees it as a tactical objective. The recent Chinese-Russian alliance, as seen through BRIC developments, is seen by Trump as a major U.S. threat. Trump sees the increased alliance has been driven by aggressive U.S. actions of economic sanctions under the Biden administrations. What Trump sees is that weakening of that alliance is a major strategic imperative for American security. He knows he likely can't break the alliance, but he needs to weaken it, because together Russia and China is a serious adversary. To Trump, Russia must see key advantages in working with America. Achieving a closer relationship is a strategic goal for Trump. To Trump, China is the existential threat to the United States. Trump's recent two executive memorandums, which I outlined in a weekly newsletter, makes this exceedingly clear. Russia is also a key blocking link in another Trump priority, the Arctic imperative. Though it gets little priority, China is seeking to establish itself as a key Arctic stakeholder. Chinese leaders see the region as a new crossroads of the world, a new source of raw materials, and a new avenue for manifesting its growing power. A shifting climate is speeding the pace of change in the region. Climate change is still a factor in the region, where the region warms at some 4 times the rate of the rest of the world. This means more access for settlements in the high north and more chances for competitor activity. China is working closely with Russia in an attempt to be seen as the Arctic power. Economically, the reasons are: 1. Access to resources. Energy and rare earth elements are increasingly critical in modern military equipment. Secondly, it offers shorter trade routes for a country dependent on exports. And thirdly, increased influence in the region through scientific research, infrastructure development, and cooperation with Arctic nations. Militarily, we have the fact that hypersonic weapons have changed the kinetic warfare and the concept of MAD, or what has worked since the Cold War, of mutual assured destruction. The Arctic is looking to be the great game of the 21st century. Trump's plan appears to be to boost the hemispheric defense across the Americas by annexing Greenland, reclaiming control of the Panama Canal, and securing Canada's northern border. It is basically a modern version of the Monroe Doctrine called 2.0. It is all about hemispheric control. Rather than fighting foreign wars and being the policeman to the world, economically it is better to use two oceans and simply protect the homeland. With Iron Dome technology, as has been proven in Israel, it is a more economical solution for defense than policing the world with over 600 U.S. military bases. How that defensive need will be replaced will be interesting to see, but it means others are going to pay, no longer the U.S. The U.S. defense sector, however, will no doubt continue to benefit. Trump's two executive memorandum regarding China suggests he is fully aware that a conflict with China is likely less a kinetic warfare as opposed to becoming asymmetric warfare. Many believe China is already fully engaged in asymmetric warfare against the United States. Trump sees all this, and through what appears to be confusion, has a defined plan, at least in his head. Trump has many weaknesses, but his proven strength is as a strategic thinker, a deal maker, a risk taker, and a man of action. He is not a politician by nature with his crude, arrogant, and often belligerent attitude, which offends most people. This, however, may make him the ideal man for the change that must occur in the U.S. Like General Patton at the Battle of the Bulge, he may be the right man for this time in U.S. history. Time will tell. So, what has Trump's actions wrought? How is this impacting the defense sector? Well, as the top red circle shows, that since his election, European defense stocks have exploded higher. Actually, since the Ukraine war started, European stocks have been on a tear. Over the last month, they've exploded at an even faster pace since Vice President J.D. Vance's Munich speech, then followed with Trump's withdrawal from supporting Ukraine after the unprecedented White House tiff with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. The bottom line here is that both events together shook EU thinking and perceptions to their core. EU defense and aerospace stocks surged 21%, with troubled EU banks suddenly becoming darlings, surging 14%. World-leading stock market darling Nvidia found itself left as an also-ran, as European defense stocks in Q1 became arguably the new Magnificent Seven. Money flows headed for the EU, with inflows in 4 weeks being the largest in 10 years. Compound growth expectations surged ahead of everything. However, we need to understand this is within a relatively small sector. You need a magnifying glass in order to see the tiny European spending on defense. This suggests that if the money flows, the opportunity could be dramatic. But will the money flow? After all, the European economy is not strong, debt is already high, and the European leadership is not known for dramatic and aggressive shifts. Trump certainly got everyone's attention, whether it was part of a plan or not. It got the intended effect of getting Europe to spend money, or at least planning to spend money. Europe has lived off U.S. defense protection since World War II. Do they fully understand how expensive a military is and what the costs of build-up are? Maybe they do, but where's the money going to come from? European expenditures on defense by country are meager at best. Combined, they look a little better, but EU has never had an EU defense plan other than NATO, which has been primarily funded by the U.S. Even then, only recently have EU countries overall raised their mandated minimal levels to the 2% level. With many EU countries like France already having debt to GDP levels well above EU mandated max, where is all the required money going to come from? Urgent and near panic meetings were called by the EU on February the 17th to consider what was to be done. What came from the EU session is actually quite startling. As President von der Leyen said, and I quote her, "The question is no longer whether Europe's security is threatened in a very real way, or whether Europe should shoulder more of the responsibility for its own security. We are in an era of rearmament, and Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending, both to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on much more responsibility for our own European security." What was announced was the Rearm Europe plan, as President von der Leyen iterated, and I again quote, "I have outlined in this letter to the leaders the Rearm Europe plan. This set of proposals focus on how to use all the financial levers at our disposal in order to help member states to quickly and significantly increase expenditures in defense capabilities. Number one, the first part of the Rearm Europe plan is to unleash the use of public funding in defense at a national level. Member states are ready to invest more in their own security if they have fiscal space, and we must enable them to do so. This is why, as she says, we will shortly propose to activate the National Escape Clause from the Stability and Growth Pact. It will allow member states to increase significantly their defense expenditures without triggering the excessive deficit procedure. For example, if member states would increase their defense spending by 1.5% of GDP on average, this could create fiscal space of close to 650 billion euros over a period of 4 years. The second proposal will be a new instrument. It will provide 150 billion euros of loans to member states for defense investment. This is basically about spending better and spending together. She is talking about pan-European capability domains. For example, air and missile defense, artillery systems, missiles and ammunition drones, and anti-drone systems, but also to address other needs from cyber to military mobility, for example. It will help member states to pool demand and to buy together. Of course, with this equipment, member states can massively step up their support to Ukraine, at least she thinks. So immediately, military equipment would be available for Ukraine. This approach of joint procurement will also reduce costs, reduce fragmentation, increase interoperability, and strengthen the EU's defense industrial base. Again, she asserts this. It can be to the benefit of Ukraine, as she described, so this is Europe's moment, and they must live up to it. The third point she makes is using the power of the EU budget. There is a lot, she claims, that they can do in this domain in the short term to direct more funds towards defense-related investments. This is why she can announce that they will propose additional possibilities and incentives for member states that they will decide if they want to use cohesive policy programs to increase defensive spending. Point 4 and 5 she makes is that the last two areas of action aim at mobilizing private capital by accelerating savings and investment union and through the European Investment Bank. Von der Leyen concluded, and I quote, "Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. Rearm Europe could mobilize close to 800 billion euros for a safe and resilient Europe. We will continue working closely with our partners in NATO. This is a moment for Europe, and we are ready to step up," unquote. If that wasn't enough, as I release this video, Germany separately has legislation from its newly elected government, if approved, could total in the area of another 800 billion. As this chart illustration shows, this is unprecedented by any German measure. Is it any wonder the stocks are going crazy? German stocks, as would be expected, are leading the EU numbers I showed previously in this video. German military arms manufacturing Rheinmetall looks like a NVIDIA stock chart from 2024. German military expenditures are currently only 7% of U.S. defense expenditures. Financially, Germany saw the biggest jump in 10-year yield since 1990 after the historic stimulus package was revealed, on par with reunification. Bond swap spreads are close to all-time tights. What the bond and credit markets are saying is, though the politicians want this, how will it all be paid for, especially considering the state of the German and EU country? I will leave the whole discussion of how the global markets are going to absorb all this debt, especially with the U.S. debt level already a problem, China in trouble, and the global economy slowing. A modern military comes with some expensive requirements, but also needed leadership in many areas. Defense is more than traditional weapons. It requires national technology research leadership, cyber attack and security systems, space platforms, drone and robotic technologies, defense shields, rapid deployment systems, secure supply chains, technology leadership, even down to icebreakers. They have to be their own technology. You can't just buy it because you're going to be buying it from competitors. They could become your threat. Modern military equipment is incredibly dependent on all sorts of rare earth minerals and metals. This graph gives you just a sense of the issue. Though you thought we had rare earth problems before, no wonder Trump has targeted the Arctic and wants Ukraine rare earth metals as part of the Ukraine defense funding guarantees. It also requires supply chain security. The U.S. learned during COVID that a global supply chain comes with a major security exposure. How will Europe address this? Operational readiness, as the U.S. learned after the failed Afghanistan pullout, getting people to fight for their country isn't a given. In Europe, the question is, would you fight for your country? Looks like most Europeans expect Uncle Sam to do their safeguarding. So, who are some of the key players we should keep an eye on? Give some thought to a Nordic stock basket of Saab, Mildev, Invisio, and Kongsberg, as well as an EU basket of Rheinmetall, BAE, Dassault, Thales, and Safran. Of course, there are many funds and ETFs that are doing well, as you would expect. Do your homework. So what should we conclude? First, consider the major exposures of the impact of a Ukraine peace plan. What happens if the war disappears? How much will they really follow through? Or what happens if the EU falls into a recession? Because as I've pointed out many times, the Keynesian deficit spending is no longer work. I've been consistently pointing out that Keynesian fiscal spending no longer delivers the economic growth it once did. It is highly likely only to leave a debt increase that a country cannot support. Secondly, in considering a EU defense strategy, you need to look at doing your research and assessment during what I see to be an expected coming corrective consolidations. Thirdly, by well-positioned U.S. leaders, study the new Hexas defense plan. And note this chart to the right. U.S. is going to spend money on defense, but it was going to be spent differently. Consider also buying into rare earth materials and ingredients. A difficult job, as I found, in trying to make that actually happen. I'd like to take a moment as a reminder. Do not trade from any of these slides. They're for educational and discussion purposes only. As negative as these comments often are, there's actually seldom been a better time for investing. However, it requires careful analysis and not necessarily following what has been the traditional, true, and tried approaches. Do your reading and make sure you have a knowledgeable and well-informed professional financial advisor. So until we talk again, may 2025 turn out to be an outstanding investment year for you and your family. And I sincerely thank you for listening.